Hi everyone and welcome back. I enjoyed that lunch, hope you guys all did as well. We have sort of quite an interesting an afternoon. We've invited HMRC to come and talk to us, but I think this is the first time we've had guys from policy. So we've got Ben Fowler and John Paul Brett from the actual sort of policy side, and they're going to be followed by Stephen Younger, who is more on the operational side. So I'm very interested to see from a policy perspective what GVMS is going to look like and how it's going to actually sort of be implemented practically. I must just ask, this is being recorded and is going to sort of be put on the website, and apparently I slipped before lunch. If anyone's asking a question, put up your hand and I will bring a microphone to you so that your question can be recorded. Apparently before lunch we've got the answers but we don't have the questions. So yeah, so gents, over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon everyone. So first error, it's the wrong person up there, so apologies. We prepared our slides prior to Mr. Vallely, one of my colleagues, moving on to another team. So I am actually John Paul Brett, as Des says, on the HMRC policy engagement team. So very brave putting HMRC on after the pudding session. I'll try to make it a bit more dynamic, so not to be too dry. So yes, from a policy perspective, we thought it's a fabulous time to give you a bit of an update on activity so far in progress and going forwards around customs controls. Following, so obviously we were currently in the period of a staged customs controls process and set of requirements for customs, which will obviously be moving to a full customs control model from January of next year. So I wanted to give you a little bit more information on that, and I will then, like my colleague Ben will come in with a little bit more detail, particularly around how that works for things like border controls and things like that. So first of all, in terms of the timeline towards full controls, you'll all be aware there was an announcement a month or so ago, 14th of September, which provided information on a revised timetable for import controls across government. On this slide, it does share some of the kind of key activities and the timetables that are associated with those. I think it's worth pointing out that this is kind of like a holistic view of like the key timetables across government and across full controls. Obviously, I'm talking to you about the HMRC elements of that. On the HMRC side, I think the key points to highlight are that for safety and security, so safety and security for imports, that will now come into force from the 1st of July next year, rather than the 1st of January of next year, as was previously planned. And that is largely to give stakeholders more time to prepare to meet those safety and security import requirements. Safety and security for exports, though, the plan is unchanged. We've actually had those requirements that have already been applied since the beginning of this year. There has been a temporary waiver in place where exit summary declarations weren't required in certain circumstances. So things like, well, there's two key ones, one with movements in ro-ro vehicles and one when it comes to empty units under a transport contract. So there was a waiver there, but that came to an end at the end of last month. And so that's fully now, safety and security for exports has applied since the 1st of October. So that's the timetable for safety and security requirements. More generally for full customs controls, though, there is no change in the timetable. So as I've just said, we're currently going through the staged customs control process, and we're moving to full customs controls from the 1st of January next year. As you all know, that was originally scheduled to come into force from end of June this year, but was extended due to the disruption caused by COVID and to give businesses more time to prepare. So it's been, there's already been huge strides towards readiness. It's kind of like a long-standing requirement And HMRC, you know, one of our top priorities is to support trader readiness and business readiness more generally on getting ready for those full customs controls. So there's a little bit about the timetable and where we are with the timetable. I then just wanted to spend just a minute or so on what it means around declarations particularly. So where we are now in terms of stage customs controls, until the end of this year, most traders moving non-controlled goods are able to take advantage of a delayed declaration easement, whereby they can import the goods and basically put things in their own records, and all they need to do as they move those goods across the frontier is have proof of their EORI, really. So it's fairly straightforward and simplified in terms of how you can move those goods into the UK. And then within 175 days, they have to follow that up with a supplementary declaration. And of course pay any required duties via the duty deferment account. So that's where we are at the moment. Around delayed declarations. As I say, we're then moving to the full declarations process from January of next year. And what that will mean is that the delayed declarations easement will no longer be available. What will happen is that traders will need to arrange to make a full declaration unless authorised for simplifications. It's worth saying that those operating or moving goods through like pre-lodgement ports, and we'll get onto the kind of different types of ports in a moment, those operating through pre-lodgement ports or using GVMS would have to declare in advance of moving those goods. And I also just wanted to kind of highlight what we've done in terms of trying to make it easier for intermediaries taking on new clients within this framework. What we've done is to support intermediaries, we've amended liability rules so that intermediaries can directly represent traders who are established in the UK, so can use their own authorisations or the traders' authorisations to use simplified declaration procedures. And because obviously they're directly represented, it means the trader would largely be solely liable. But I think it's also worth stressing that when intermediaries, agents are representing non-UK established traders, that would still need to be done via indirect representation. So there is still that joint and several liability. I think we've heard from when we've been doing other engagements that message hasn't always been clear. It is on gov.uk, but perhaps not always presented as clearly as required. So I think it's worth kind of using this opportunity to re-emphasise that as well. So that's...
And could we also clarify that is not just a temporary easement, that is...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always, we always say, and will continue to be reviewed, but there is no plan to change that. So yeah, absolutely, just worth saying that is the long-term picture as we see it, yeah. So that's what I wanted to mention first off. If I then hand over to my colleague Ben, who can go into a little bit more detail on other sides of the requirements. Yeah, thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Ben. I'm in the same team as John Paul and look more at the ports and carriers aspects of our work. And David, as you will all know, was on the haulers, intermediaries, etc. side of things. I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the customs models themselves, what led us to that position, and a bit more about what the world will look like from the 1st of January 2022. So at that point, obviously, we are looking at having full customs controls with the EU in a similar fashion to how you would expect with rest of world transports. And the way that we have approached that is by looking at what problems that presents and what problems we need to solve. So we have then developed two models, the first of which is temporary storage. That should be of no surprise to anybody here whatsoever. It is effectively how container ports work for the rest of the world. That is that you can bring the container in, enter it onto the inventory system at the inventory link port, and then you can control when you make the point of declaration, etc. The issue, obviously, with the shorter distances involved with EU transport is that there is less time and there are natural and practical bottlenecks in terms of actually moving particularly ro-ro movements through ports and out in a timely fashion. And as John Paul alluded to earlier, that has led to the development of what is called the pre-lodgement model. So the pre-lodgement model looks effectively at the way that goods move as something of a pyramid. So you have one vessel arriving in the port, but that vessel contains a number of HGVs, for example, and those HGVs may contain a number of different consignments. So for purely practical purposes, what GVMS does and what the pre-lodgement model does is it looks at grouping that risking within the vehicle as a container, and then it looks at moving the timing of that in a way that it would allow the facilitation of that to move through the port on arrival in the smoothest way possible. So effectively that's bringing forwards some of the processes that you would normally have at imports and putting them before the export point to allow for basically things to move out of the port on arrival in the most efficient way possible, preventing bottlenecks, preventing log jams, and so forth. Within that, obviously, HMRC is aware that no plan survives the first contact, and there are obviously a number of different ports or environments where potentially one or other of those models isn't going to be a perfect solution. So we have two alternatives. We've got one listed up there. There's two alternatives. One is what's called a mixed model, where you can choose some, a berth or berths to be GVMS and pre-lodgement, and other berths within the same port environment to be temporary storage. But also we have the offer of what we refer to as a bespoke model. The onus on the bespoke model is on the port to come to us with a proposal of how they can offer an equivalent level of control to what we would offer in either the pre-lodgement or temporary storage model. And what has happened there is we have effectively from an HMRC perspective and from an engagement perspective, we initially spoke to all the ports. There's 270 odd ports or berths within the UK, and we've spoken to those. They have made an option of which model to do, and then they have applied to the National Frontier Approvals Units to have an authorisation to operate that model. That obviously then contains any necessary requirements in terms of giving effect to customs control. And it's in the border operating model if anybody would wish to refer to it, but broadly that is based on a categorisation of ports into three different categories. Category 1 ports are those where there is no or very, very limited ability to actually consider any form of checks within the port environment. Category 2 is some capacity, and then Category 3 ports are the ones where there is practical capacity to actually carry out the checks within the port environment. So again, the bespoke model is an opportunity to sort of provide an equivalent level of control for circumstances where those aren't. Unfortunately, for commercial reasons, we can't tell you who the ports are that are operating which model. There is a little bit of information in the border operating model, but we expect that ports have been speaking to the carriers that use their facilities, and carriers and ports together have been communicating what they plan to do as it affects their plans. I'm seeing some shaking of heads, so that might not be the case, but I will not pass comment on that. I'm sure others may wish to do so. So moving on then, GVMS. I'm going to cover GVMS in a moderate amount of detail, and Stephen, who's presenting after us, is going to provide a bit more of an operational perspective in terms of what we've been doing about getting people onboarded for it and so forth. So I don't want to tread on his toes, and we've obviously tried to coordinate as much as possible while still providing a high-level introduction. So effectively, as mentioned earlier, GVMS is a solution to an explicitly identified need by certain ports and certain carriers to be able to move goods through the actual infrastructure without necessarily having the ability to provide a space to stop the vehicle, to carry out the checks, without potentially, obviously, that then flowing back to the point where the vessel can't pull alongside and start to unload. So what it effectively does is it requires the pre-lodgement. What I'll do is rather than putting a blank wall of text on you, we've got a nice diagram there, which kind of indicates the pyramid across the top, large number of boxes on a smaller number of lorries on a one singular vessel, which is moving in via the port. So looking at that, effectively what happens is the trader or agent is pre-lodging the declaration, like you could have the opportunity to do under the temporary storage model if you wanted to pre-lodge a declaration and have it cleared once the notification of arrival is received. But then there is an explicit link between the trader and the haulier, insofar as the haulier is linking the declarations to the vehicle, which allows that single point of contact, brings that pyramid I mentioned before down onto the haulier and the single vehicle, and allows those declarations to be grouped together such that when the vehicle is looking at entering the ferry or the Eurotunnel, it can have what's called permission to proceed as part of the export process, which allows for the risking when the bow doors are closed, and therefore the vehicle to know whether it has to proceed to a point of check or to enter the network and disappear off to do whatever the haulier wishes to do. So the obligations can be passed to a third party, so there is a role for intermediaries in there. But obviously from a haulier perspective, that is the point where everything now coalesces. So there's a communication option for the driver itself. From the carrier perspective, when a vehicle presents, there is a check to see whether the GMR is in place, and then obviously that the person has permission to proceed. That's part of all the check-in process and so forth. So again, the slides, I believe, are being circulated afterwards, so I won't linger on it for too long because I'm conscious, based on your timetable, I don't want to run over where we were. So effectively, the crux of where we are from HMRC's perspective, all of the ports should have made a decision about what they want to do and should be in the National Frontier Approval Unit process at the moment. So our focus at the moment is on hauliers and registration for GVMS and making sure that the haulier side is ready. From a comms perspective, that involves both engagement in fora like yourselves, but also we have a large amount of communication that's going out nationally and internationally to drivers and to hauliers in their many forms. Because we're conscious that we say haulier and people tend to think of a larger operator's license with a number of different wagons and trailers on it, whereas in reality that can be a 1 or 2 man band with a relatively small amount with a standard international equivalent license. So that provides that. So in terms of what people actually need, government gateway account, most businesses should now have it. If you're taking pictures, we do have the slide deck. I think it's going to be circulated, so it's much clearer, and you don't get my face in the background. So you get your government gateway account. Most businesses, I imagine, would have that as part of the Making Tax Digital Drive and various other HMRC initiatives to communicate with taxpayers. An EORI, again, imagine most people would have those. Then the crux of it is to register for GVMS, make sure that you're onboarded with that. And again, Stephen will cover a little bit about that process a little bit later. And then moving on from there, just briefly touching on safety and security as well. Obviously, safety and security sits alongside, but overlapping in different ways with customs clearance and the traditional border management in terms of looking at moving the assessment of risk slightly earlier into the process. As John Paul has already mentioned, safety and security information from the 1st of October is required when exporting goods now in Ro-Ro vehicles and when exporting empty pallets. That came into effect from the 1st of October. Obviously, we hear feedback from stakeholders, but we've not heard anything particularly negative about that change. I'm not seeing any surprised looks on that, so hopefully everyone has found that process from the 1st of October has been reasonably smooth. And then the ENS process, as John Paul mentioned, takes effect from the 1st of July of next year. And that will then cover, obviously, the notification. There is a table on the next slide which talks about the sort of the time windows for notification. For the forum we're presenting to today, we wanted to touch a little bit on liability and legal responsibility. So in terms of the party responsible, effectively, and we mentioned GVMS, and we mentioned the role of the haulier earlier. For Ro-Ro accompanied, the weight falls largely on the shoulders of the haulier or haulage company. Whereas for Ro-Ro unaccompanied and any non-Ro-Ro goods, then the ferry operator or the carrier has the responsibility for that. Although, obviously, in all circumstances, an intermediary can act on others' behalf, which will allow that to proceed that way. So again, it's not that slide, it's the slide after. So yes, so the Safety and Security GB will be in effect from the 1st of July of next year. For goods moving into Great Britain, obviously Northern Ireland has slightly separate aspects to do with the way the Northern Ireland Protocol operates. I'm not an expert on that, and I'm looking around to see if our expert is here, but I don't think she's come back up from lunch yet. That sounds terrible. She did have a call to take, I might add. She's not still trying to hoover up the wine. And so yes, so GB ORI numbers will be required to be able to submit into that, and John Paul sort of talked about direct and indirect representation earlier, and obviously that has an effect. In terms of the timelines, we've not, as far as I'm aware, actually changed any of the timelines themselves from what was there before, but obviously previously there was no requirement to have safety and security notifications between the UK and EU 27. And then, conscious of time and wrapping up, talking briefly about the actual risking of the information. First off, we obviously have validation, so is the information that's been submitted in the correct format, etc., which is a bit of a sense check, and then it's obviously then risked, and that has an impact on the movement across the border and gives the opportunity for Border Force to intervene before the loading of the actual goods themselves rather than post that. So here's a little diagram. Again, slides will be circulated. And so that sort of provides just a bit of a high-level process map. Moving on again, and I'm conscious of time, this is sort of a standard slide we provide, which gives a bit of an inkling into some of the sources of information people might have if they want to find out a little more. Obviously, we published a border operating model, and the most recent edition was in July, if I recall correctly. Obviously, we're updating that periodically to reflect the latest information. I do think it's been thrown slightly out of date, as John Paul mentioned, by the previous announcement, so we will be updating that as soon as possible. There is a huge wealth of guidance. I appreciate it's not always the easiest to find on gov.uk, but nonetheless. Stephen will speak a bit more about helplines and so forth from a readiness perspective there. But we have been conducting a large number of webinars. I forget how many 100,000 people have attended one or another over time, but nonetheless, they have been very successful. And then finally, I'm conscious we've actually gone 1 minute over into Stephen's time, so that's probably well timed from my perspective in not fielding as many questions as you might have, but nonetheless, I'm sure there'll be some, and John Paul and I can happily try and field them if we take 5 minutes. It's up to yourself, Des, how you want to.
Go ahead, yeah. I need to bring this to you.
You're going to come up and join me to field questions?
Please ask questions.
In relation to GVMS, is it recognised in the EU? Because you kind of state on there that the goods need to be entered from a UK perspective before they leave the EU. Are the EU really going to hold the goods in, say, France if the export declaration is done?
Yeah, that's the plan. So it's obviously a GVMS is
do they recognise the GVMS system in the EU?
Yeah, so it's a UK system, but obviously like key parts of the supply chain. So you mentioned the ports, the carriers, and the hauliers. Often won't be UK based, or they will be operating across the frontier. And we are working with all of those parts of the supply chain, including the ports on the EU side, just so that the process can be facilitated from their side as well as ours. So yeah, that is definitely the intention.
And just to briefly add to that, we've also got a lot of guidance that's gone out to EU hauliers. We've worked with CLECAT and other trade organisations in the EU to make sure that hauliers are in the EU are aware of that. The guidance is available in 14 languages across the EU. So there's a lot of drive there, and we have, I can't give you the figures, partially because I don't remember them off the top of my head, and partially because obviously confidentiality reasons, but we've had very significant registrations in hauliers in the EU getting ready to do that. So the message is landing.
But I think this is the issue at the moment, is that there is a reliance on third parties. You're not relying on the customs authorities within the European Union. You're relying on carriers and hauliers. I mean, that's essentially the question that industry is asking. And there is no.
Yeah, so I suppose looking at it, the vested interest for the carrier is to be able to operate their services with the frequency and the loading type that they currently do within, or did within, the EU environment. And what we've done is we've worked with carriers and others to facilitate that business model operating. And I think, you know, I think we completely would understand the basis for your question. I think it's a perfectly valid one. What we
just consider the likes of Calais
yes.
holding the goods if the UK haven't done what they need to do.
So with regard to that, it's to do the way that it would operate in Calais, for example, is that the haulier would need to have had the pre-lodge declarations linked into the GVMS system, and then the check-in process just purely check. It doesn't validate whether the goods are risked or anything else. It just purely checks that the person has a GMR. And the obligation, we've worked very closely with carriers and with others to develop the system, but it's about bringing that point where the check-in is purely checking that something is there. It is not assessing whether that has been completely completed correctly, that liability process hasn't changed, but what it is doing is it's providing a part of a check on there, which allows the facilitation of the business model they wish to operate. And I think that's
yeah. I mean, the key message is absolutely right. You know, there's lots of other. It's interdependent with these other parts of the supply chain, and as you say, the carriers that are facing based on in the EU side are integral to this, and that is why, you know, we have got really close relationships. We're working with those types of stakeholders on a very, very regular basis to articulate the requirements and to ensure that they can comply with those on both sides of the frontier. I would say actually the haulier side is probably the biggest challenge because it's so much more fragmented. You know, we won't have the same reach and knowledge of everybody as we would do, say, for the carrier side. So that's the bigger risk area. But as Ben says, like our focus is kind of driving up that knowledge both on UK and non-UK based hauliers and others, just to be aware of what is going to be required from January so that they're ready, they register for the system, they're able to operate it, and it doesn't come as a shock in January. Yeah.
We'll badger Stephen with some more questions after this, but if I could just ask, I mean, what level of confidence do you guys have in GVMS actually working? I mean, I've actually just got, while we're sitting there, got an email saying that they cannot see the ENSs in C-Track cannot see the ENSs in GVMS this morning. And HMRC has told us not to capture them, even though we still have a liability.
Yeah.
So
you put me on the spot, Des, aren't you? And like the stock answer would be, it's not my remit. But actually, in all seriousness, yeah, we do have confidence in the system. You know, this is obviously a new system. Well, it's not a new system actually. It's a system that's going to obviously have a massive uptick in use from January, but is already being used in Northern Ireland side, in transit as well. So it's something that's not happening overnight, but obviously will be scaled up significantly. So obviously there's some serious challenges when that comes to that, and obviously systems as well. There's always challenges when it comes to new systems or bigger, you know, upscaling of systems. But in terms of the department's view, you know, we've got confidence in it happening and you know, being successful. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thanks, Des. So I'm David McMillan from Bolloré Logistics. I've got an observation and a couple of questions, if I may. The observation, first of all, from a customs broker's point of view, is that the mixed model creates absolute havoc trying to work out what's what and what's coming into which wharf. Why on earth was it ever created? We'll leave that one. My real question is, and Des alluded to this earlier with your colleagues from DEFRA, are you absolutely certain that this is going to happen 1/1/22, please?
Again, it's a very difficult one for me to answer. Our plans are that is absolutely going. They will happen. That's what we are being instructed. That's how we're approaching things. That's our plan. So who knows beyond like kind of my vision, but that's absolutely what we're planning for. 1st of January 22 for full controls for customs purposes. Yeah.
And it's worth just adding to that we obviously we had a recent written ministerial statement that went in from Lord Agnew. That at that point, that was the consideration of everything that has gone ahead. So that is the most recent point at which a decision has been made, and the decision at that point by our ministers and lords was first the first. These are the things that are going to stay, and as John Paul put up in his slide earlier, I can go back to it if helpful. Certain things were going to move, but the things that weren't going to move were full customs controls are first and first.
Okay, and just finally, you mentioned that for commercial reasons you can't tell us which ports are which. I've got an awful lot of very confused European clients who want a definitive list of which ports are offering which facilities. Please, can you get hold of it somehow or other, or get it available to us? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and we will take that one away. I would just say a couple of things on that one. From a practical point of view, it's very difficult for HMG to curate such a list, given there's so many, and they're currently going through a formal approval process. So up until they've kind of been approved for a particular control model, we wouldn't be able to publish it anyway. There will definitely be some products that will help support that, which have been committed to, such as an update in legislation around which ports will be using the pre-lodgement model, and then in more detail on gov.uk website there will be an updated list of all the ports that will be using GVMS system as well. So by default that will hopefully allay a lot of those concerns and meet that ask. Yeah.
That's the list.
Yeah.
Hopefully the last question. From the 1st of January, can you use EIDR with GVMS?
Yeah, so EIDR will be part of the simplified customs declarations processes that will be available. Obviously, there will be requirements in terms of authorisations and things like that you don't have quite so much of now under stage customs controls, but there will be certain facilitations still available, including EIDR.
So if you had
I think we
Just
need
to
to
say,
clarify that. I mean,
Stephen's going to talk a little bit about
because that's really important, because if you're saying yes, then that means that you don't have to provide a simplified frontier declaration for those companies. For certain companies, that means less expense. So if you can use GVMS and EIDR, then that's great.
I don't believe that's possible. Maybe Stephen can copy that for us.
We do it in Ireland,
Sorry?
We do it in Ireland. So what happens in Ireland with our EIDR is on the ENS, box 44.1 and 44.2, you put your document code and the EIDR authorisation number in, and that then alleviates the requirement for an import declaration into Ireland. So you just have your ENS with the EIDR, so I assume it'll be something similar.
Yeah,
Well, let's hope so. We're no longer part of the EU, so...
If we could have confirmation of that, that would be really great.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at transit, and that's a lot more burdensome if you have to go that route rather than the EIDR route. And you've also got to consider companies have been doing that from the 1st of January. They must be trusted if they're doing CFSP declarations.
Well, I know that Stephen's going to touch on CFSP in his presentation, so perhaps if that's not answered it, we'll respond in writing later. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Stephen, I think the prelude to you coming has been sort of is there. Thank you.
Wow. No pressure. Afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. Crumbs. I haven't presented this many people without a mute button for some time, so bear with me. It's lovely to see you all. So thank you to my friends from Policy. I am one of the operational leads in Customs. You're a lot taller than I am. I'm one of the operational leads in Customs. Here we go. Right. I'm actually the head of Customs and International Trade Helpline. I manage that area. Also manage some other teams up in Washington, and I'm responsible for a lot of the outreach activity as well. So I think I want to give you today the operational perspective. Topics I was asked to cover today: special procedures. I was asked to talk a little bit about customs warehousing, and what I propose to do is we've been doing a lot of outreach activity. So we have a combined CFSP and customs warehousing presentation, and I've selected some bits of that I think highlight the process that we go through in operations. And if anybody is interested in the full set of slides, I'd be very happy to share that. I will be talking about GVMS, So I've got the latest from the project team, so I'll share that with you today. And also I've brought some of the comms that we'll be going out with over the next few days, actually. So I'll share those comms with you, as well as talk a little bit about what our future plans are. So I'll go on to the next slide. So I am very new to customs, relatively new to customs. Some colleagues you may know, Alison Doyle, Chris Jones, have been very active in customs for some time. I think Chris Jones has attended this group before, so he sends his regards. He's been on leave, so he wasn't able to join today. So, but he sends his regards. Customs and international trade. Well, so the telephone number's there, but I manage the Customs and International Trade helpline. It's the main route in for customers who have queries about customers. My team are able to handle most straightforward queries about customs, but we do have really good quality escalation routes in when the customer needs are greater than my team can provide. I've got a graph up there which shows the demand over time. So January, you see there's a really massive spike, about 13,000 calls in a week. That's tapered down now to about 3,500 a week, but between 3,500 and 4,000, pretty consistent. We are open 8 till 10, but we do have 24/7 service available. We are open 8 till 10 Monday to Friday, 8 till 4 Saturday to Sunday. In addition to that, we have web chat. We have a virtual assistant covering the main customer journeys that we encounter, EORI numbers, importing goods into the UK, exports, parcels and packaging. They're the kind of things that customers ask us about the most. Get about 1,400 customers per week using the virtual assistant service, about 40% of which turn into web chats because they're more complicated. I think the thing that I'm really working on is we do have to escalate a percentage of our calls. I think we get a lot of customer feedback to say that customers find that frustrating. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment to try to identify the main call types that we have to transfer across to make sure that, to actually consider if my team can pick them up. So I think that's something that we're looking to do over the next few weeks and months. Certainly, we are expecting to see a spike in demand. So I want to make sure that we have that in place before we see that spike. I thought you'd be interested to see the main call types that we receive. So this is the last 3 months worth of data. It's last 3 months, but it's been very consistent since last November. Top one, can you explain import procedures? About 15% of calls we transfer to the second tier. And I will talk about the tiered service that we provide in a lot more detail. EORI numbers, how do I obtain an EORI number? Consistently one of the highest. Just broad explanations about export and import procedures. GVMS, we were talking about GVMS, that counts for about 1% of my calls at the moment, pretty low, but I suspect that could increase. As of about an hour ago, we've helped about 294,000 customers through that helpline. So I'm really proud of the work that the team have done. You may be interested in the type of customers that do use the line. We did some analysis, and it's mainly individuals, small businesses, not a lot of agents, not a lot of intermediaries, and not a lot of large business customers. So it tends to be small businesses. The other thing that I've been doing a lot of is customer outreach. I showed you that diagram before there. It is clear that demand has dropped significantly. We have a customer account management process in place for large businesses. That's been extremely effective. So we wanted to try and do something for small and medium-sized businesses as well. So to that end, we've been running, in addition to the webinars, we've been running outreach sessions covering such topics as DDA, CFSP, guarantees, transit, etc., etc., etc. And we've been doing some bespoke sessions for trade associations as well. So if anybody wants us to focus on customs warehousing, we've been able to do a session that that focuses very heavily on that. Whatever that trade association needs, we've been able to deliver. Future plans, I think between now and Christmas I'll be doing a lot of work around hauliers and GVMS, so as we've discussed today, and then CDS in the future, and some support for intermediaries who require further support. So really, it's been really incredibly active and popular, and we're keen to share all that with people, and I'll go through some elements of that today. But I'm going to touch on customs warehousing now. That was one of the topics I was asked to cover. And like I said, I'm going to do a blend of customs warehousing and CFSP because it's the same team essentially. And the performance at the moment, 52-day average clearance against a 60-day target. Now, 52 days seems like an awful long time, but when I talk through our processes, I think I'll try and describe why it is that it takes that long. But I think one of the things that's really important is if you are planning to submit applications, you need to be cognizant of the time it can take to process them, even when we're processing in target, even when everything's going well. You need to be aware that some of these applications can take some time. I checked as of last week, we had 21 customs warehouse applications on hand, 19 of which were in target, and the 2 that were out of target, there were some questions that we needed to talk to the customer about. So I think the team's performed really well in terms of customs warehousing. Just a bit of background there. Again, this is from one of my outreach presentations. Customs warehouse special procedure allows goods to be brought into the UK and stored while customs duties are suspended. Really, it's to help facilitate trade by pausing duty payment while goods are imported in the UK. There are about 1,000 customs warehouses. Doesn't have to be a big warehouse, it can be a safe or a safety deposit box. And goods that use this service account for about £14 billion per year annually. So it's a really important process for us and obviously to yourselves as well. It's really important to say that unlike other special procedures, once authorised, there's no time limit on the period of validity of a customs warehouse application. So, there's a lot of things that we require to make sure that that we have in place before we grant people customs warehousing. You have to be established in the UK, have to have an EORI number, have to be financially solvent, have to have a good compliance record, not have other operations in place which predominate over the need for storage, have a genuine economic need. You have to comply with all the legal obligations and conditions set. You have to make sure that your records are up to date and that we can review them. So there's lots of things in place, and these are the kind of things that we check, and these are the kind of reasons why it can take up to 60 days for this process to go through. And like I said, this is just a very small element of our presentation, and we'll share the full one with you all if anybody's interested in that. I thought it'd be interesting to go through a bit. This is the CFSP process, and like I said, the teams are combined because very often the CFSP and the CW come in at the same time. I thought it would be helpful to talk you through the process from an operations perspective, to see what it is that we do and to try and understand why it's so complicated and can take a while. So the first stage, obviously, is we receive the CNE 48. That will come either to ourselves in CSG in business tax and customs, or can go to large business, depending on what kind of customer it is. The form itself is quite detailed, but that's for details of the business, how the duties are secured, is it simplified procedures or EIDR. Traders do need to apply separately for authorisations relating to other customs procedures. It's really important to say. For example, customs warehousing, which we've been talking about, if you want to enter the goods using CFSP. So we get the application. Stage 2 is it goes through a triage process. Now this can take up to 30 days, but we do try and make sure that this gets done much quicker than that. So the triage process is where we check all of the things that are in place, as I set out before. So it includes customers established in the UK, has an EORI number, it applies to the correct customs authority, that the customer has not been convicted of a serious criminal offence linked to their business activities. that the accounts are related to customs activities and they are accessible. We want to make sure that the customers can comply with our requirements. We need to make sure that the customer hasn't, within the last 3 years, committed an infringement of our customs rules and regulations. We like to make sure that the customer is financially solvent, can cover all the legal requirements, and isn't subject to bankruptcy or proceedings. And it's really important that that they have a method in place for managing their records relating to transport of goods. If the trader can pass all of those tests and has all the documentation needed and can provide it, we will issue an acceptance letter within 30 days. Like I said, we really do try and do it much faster than that. We do try to contact the customer if there are any problems, so just so there's not a constant back and forward and the process is extended. If we do fail the application at that process, you will receive a letter from us explaining in detail why that should be. Okay. The technical officer carries out a review. That's really a Q&A check to make sure that everything's been done properly. But they then do fill in another form called a PA1, and that's about setting the customer up on Chief. So we pass that form over to the relevant department, and they make sure that the Chief badge is set up for the customer. At that point, the technical officer may well get in touch with the customer directly, just to make sure that the software links to Chief and the trader can successfully communicate with us by that method. The next step, step 5, there'll be a visiting officer. The visit isn't needed if the trader has approved economic operator in place. The visit at this stage is to check that the computer systems work with HMRC, the comms between the different software types work effectively, that the commercial records are in place and are kept in good order. And if all of that is in place, you will soon then receive from us a C&E 58, and that will be issued within 60 days, and that will inform you that you've been authorised. If for any reason you fail the authorisation test, you will be informed and you will have a right of appeal. So that, I think, the purpose of going through that in some detail really is just to help understand. I'm sure it must be frustrating for customers, and we get a lot of requests through the CIT team asking why it should be that you haven't heard from us as yet. That kind of describes the process in detail and why it should be and why it happens in that way. So, the other thing that I thought would be interesting is we've been doing a lot of these outreach sessions, and we've been receiving some interesting questions, and also I've been collecting the questions that we receive via the C&IT line as well. Let's drink this water. So, for example, we were asked why the customs warehousing and the CFSP team are combined, and we've said here that traders using CFSP, in particular SDP, often move goods straight into the customs warehouse where they're stored under duty suspension, and because CW is so closely linked with CFSP, traders often apply for both simultaneously. But I have to say CFSP is not required for CW. However, there is an advantage of having it, and it includes eliminating the cost of making full declarations. I think in the past, for every 50 CFSP applications we would get 49 CW applications. So they're very closely linked. It's perhaps not quite the same now, but certainly very closely linked in the past. Another question that we were asked, is there a minimum throughput or usage required to apply for customs warehouse? The answer is we base it on the economic need, so there's no hard cut-off in place. We have a link to a team there, and if anybody wants advice about what the limit may be for them, or what the appropriate amount may be for them, they will be happy to help. Next question that I received, with CFSP, the trader does not need to submit a supplementary declaration for entry to a customs warehouse due to the waiver allowed by DA Article 183. Is that correct? And the answer to this is yes, that would be correct. By the way, we'll share all these documents will be shared with you. So, is it allowed for trader to use entry in declarants records? So, for both entry to and removal from the customs warehouse. Yes, you can use both EIDR into customs warehousing and out of customs warehousing as long as your system's update in real time. How will the WH authorization process change for CDS? The process won't change at all. And now when we issue a chief badge, we make sure that people are authorized for CDS as well. So we're trying to future-proof the process as best we possibly can. Do I need to have a comprehensive guarantee? So, following EU transition, it's not mandatory to have a guarantee in place for customs warehousing in GB, but you do still require a CCG if you operate in Northern Ireland. So they're the kind of questions that we've been getting around customs warehousing and CFSP and the link between the two. And now I'd like to move on to GVMS.
Could you elaborate on that EIDR question asked earlier?
I can.
Will we still be able to bring goods in under EIDR?
Do you know, I don't know is the answer, but I will take that away. I've made a note of it and I will take that away and get a formal response. So, So, GVMS. So I reached out to the colleagues on the GVMS programme to make sure I had the kind of hot off the press information that I can share with you about the process. So what I'm going to talk through is what problems are we trying to solve, what's been done so far, what's planned in future, and also a little bit about our communication strategy. Obviously the transition period comes to the end and customs controls be introduced to the UK border. So we want to make sure that customers are able to make customs declarations for goods moved into and out of the EU. The UK must be able to identify and stop goods of interest to HMRC. It's really important that we, safety and security and revenue is still important, of course, but we want to make sure that the goods flow as quickly and smoothly as possible. We want to ensure that customs controls are in place at the appropriate locations, and we want to make sure that flow of traffic is maintained. Many of the EU-facing locations, the RoRo locations and the Northern Ireland-facing locations currently have a limited digital infrastructure or infrastructure to allow them to identify goods of interest to HMRC, and therefore this GVMS solution was needed to make sure customs controls could be in place at those locations, but again, we wanted to make sure that the goods could flow smoothly. And that's essentially why GVMS was introduced. Well, I thought the diagram before was really excellent, actually. It's really an enveloping system that allows hauliers to add multiple declaration bits of information into one single combined reference number. And that can be presented to that can be presented at port, and that makes check-in much smoother. So again, we've got those controls in place that we need to have in place, but we still maintain the flow of goods. So we've talked a little bit about the policy intent before, but just to reiterate, enables declaration references to be linked together, keeps trade and traffic flowing across the UK border. It allows the linking of movement of goods to a declaration. And essentially that's it happens automatically on arrival or departure of goods in both CDS and Chief. It allows us to automate the Office of Transit function into NCTS. It allows notification of the risk and outcomes of declarations held in CDS, NCTS and Chief, and they're to be issued to the person in control of the goods. Really important to say that GVMS solution is not mandatory. Rural ports do have a choice to either utilise the solution or become inventory linked. And if they do that, they would follow the temporary storage model. Okay. So what does it look like? GVMS end-to-end solution. It's digital front end, and that allows hauliers to create and populate a goods movements reference for each of the goods that movements that they're making. And again, multiple that can contain multiple goods. The carrier and port interface will allow the carrier to interact with GVMS. There is a core GVMS system which interacts with all the other key systems, CDS, Chief, Safety and Security, and ICS from release 2, and I'll talk a little bit about future releases as well. And the CTC and GVMS portals will enable transit declarations to be pushed to NCTS, and that will instigate the Office of Transit function, or that will enable a BF to be put on manual hold on the declaration for check-in, or deal with any exceptions that are identified by NCTS. So, I want to talk a little bit about what has been delivered so far, and then I'll go on to describe future releases as well. So, from January 2021, hauliers and carriers are required to have goods movement reference number to move goods from the EU to GB. That's transit movements only, or GB to NI. Once full customs checks are in place from January 2022, and again, we're working to the 1st of January 2022 as well, GVMS will be available to use for UK and EU trade. We have launched the GVMS registration service, and that came out on the 8th of December 2020, and we followed that by a Get a Goods Movements reference service on the 23rd of December, and again, that worked well. We have a GVMS check-in and embarkation function, and that was deployed on the 31st of December last year. And there's been some subsequent releases since that time. So, release 1.1 had some additional functionality to allow Northern Ireland and Great British exports. That was implemented on the 28th of February 2021. For release 1.2, that was enhanced validation to improve customer journeys, and that went in place on the 16th of May. Some further releases have taken place this year. July 2021, release 2 successfully delivered, and that was further enhancements to improve customer journeys, and that included import control systems validation, safety and security movements, reference number validation, driver self-serve functionality, and ICS arrivals. And the most recent addition to that was the activation of the EU GB journeys and integration to Chief, and that enabled live proving, and that went live on the 1st of October 2021. That was after 1st October 2021, and that was delivered in September of this year. So, but there's still more to come in terms of GVMS delivery. So, HMRC IT delivery further GVMS release. There's going to be a number of further releases up to full border controls in January 2022. That will include standard and arrived export changes, that's Chief and GVMS, safety and security changes, declaration by conduct activated, inspection location services. That enables, that provides inspection location options for drivers using GVMS. Release 2.3 still to come between now and January. Still more work to be done on what's going to be included in that, but we anticipate at this time it's going to include indirect exports, enhancement to allow multiple SNES movement requests numbers, per customs MRN, in a GMR to allow single administrative documents, and allows that to be added to a GMR. So they're the further releases that are going to be put in place to help customers between now and January 2022. Some key points I want to make then, because this is the material that's going into our briefings, and this is the material that we'll be speaking to hauliers about over the next few months. If you move goods between GB, that's England, Scotland and Wales, to the EU, you must register for the Goods Vehicle Movement Service. From the 1st of January 2022, full customs controls will apply to all goods moving between GB and the EU. Some ports, as I mentioned before, will use GVMS to clear goods through customs. If you're not registered for GVMS by 1st January and you want to use one of those ports, you won't be able to. You won't be able to clear your goods through customs, and you won't be able to cross the UK-EU border. So that's the key messages that we're putting out in a note to customers next week. Who needs to register? We want to make sure that people understand what we mean by hauliers. It includes independent drivers transporting goods and doing their own customs paperwork, company that subcontracts to pick up goods on behalf of another business, logistics business, how to transport goods and complete customs processes. If you're doing it on behalf of another business, or if you're a large retail business that declares their own goods. So we want to make sure, we want to try and reach out to all of those groups of customers to make sure they fully understand what is required. And in addition to that, before people register, they must have an IORI number, and they must have a government gateway account. And there's a website available to do that already. And in addition to that, we are providing that in multiple languages, 14 languages, I think we mentioned before there. So, the most commonly used languages that people are likely to need in order to come into the UK. So that is a very quick run through of what we know about GVMS, what's been delivered so far, what's going to be delivered, and the key messages that we're putting out to customers. The other thing that's really critical, though, is what is our support to you going to look like? And this is just in general. I want to reassure you that we're working really hard on the customer support model. We have a really great model in place already. It's a 3-tier system. Tier 0 would be gov.uk guidance that we provide. Tier 1 would be My CNIT helpline. So again, they're available from 8 till 10, Monday to Friday, 8 till 4, Saturday to Sunday. But we do have a 24/7 service available for emergencies, absolutely. And the role of the CIT team essentially is to signpost customers to the right guidance that they need and to help with basic inquiries. If we cannot help with those inquiries, we have a Tier 2 service, so we will escalate to the appropriate expert line of business, and they will hopefully help resolve that query. If they in turn can't resolve that, and it becomes a policy question, or it's something that large business need, then there's a Tier 3 process, so we make sure that but I think the thing that I want to reassure you of is whatever the issue, we make sure that it gets to the right expert to resolve. As of the 1st of January 2022, I expect a very similar model to still be in place. But what we're making sure is we're really scaling up our capacity and capability to meet predicted demands. We do predict that we will see an increase in demand, so we're making sure we've got sufficient resources in place. We are increasing the number of people we've got on out-of-hours critical care, and we have contingency plans in place. So if demand exceeds even our forecasts, we've got really good contingency plans in place, so we can bring in additional folk at a very short notice. We are increasing the number of resources we have who are GVMS trained. So we're recruiting more people into our teams to help resolve GVMS, and also new CDS declarants. We're making sure, I think one of the things that we learned last Christmas in January was we needed to make sure that we align our kind of IT departments along with our own teams to make sure that if there are IT problems, we can escalate and resolve those technical problems quickly. So we're making sure that we're in complete lockstep with those teams as well. And look, we're building contingencies on top of contingencies, just in case there are further problems and issues that demand is greater than we anticipate. So look, I think in summary, it's been a really unprecedented year for all of us. But I'm really proud of the work that we've done in customs and the work of the CIT team and others to really support customers. And I'm really confident that as we go forward, we'll continue to provide the same level of support. And no matter what happens, we hope it'll go smoothly and as planned. But no matter what happens, that we'll make sure there's sufficient support in place for you and for your customers and the rest of the trade to make sure that things run really smoothly. So thank you very much for your time, and good luck.
Thank you. Does anyone have a quick question before we move on to the next? I mean, this has come from ACITA. Bear in mind that I suppose one of the most common complaints from an audience like this is we've got no one at customs to speak to. I'm going to share this presentation. It's got a telephone number on it, and yeah. So.
Yeah, just a quick question. We know that many European hauliers are aware of GVMS, but what they're having difficulty with is getting a government gateway account and an EOI number,
Right.
because those websites are in English, not in their home languages.
Yeah.
You mentioned 14 languages. Will that apply to government gateway as well?
I'll take that away and speak to the comms teams about that, actually. So I think the 14 languages does refer to the GVMS aspects only, but if there are other aspects that we need, then I'll take that away and speak to our comms people. That's a really good point, thank
Good.
you. Yeah.
Secondary question, because haulage is very much fragmented in the EU market. One concern is because GVS is relatively inaccessible given the government gateway access, it may well put off hauliers coming to the UK when we desperately need hauliers to come to the UK.
Yeah.
Just something to bear in mind about making it more accessible.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Just very quick question on customs warehousing. Is that HMRC review happening like in person or online?
Well, yeah, we have been doing a lot. We have been doing them a lot online, actually. So we have reverted to doing reviews in person, but I think it did work well doing it online. So I think we're moving back into doing them in person, but the opportunity has existed to do it online.
Thank you. Regarding customs warehouses, I noticed that you mentioned that you could use CFSP to facilitate the exit. Would that also be applicable to controlled goods?
Don't know. Do you mind if I'll take that away as well? I'll take all these questions away and provide a full answer. Yeah.
Yeah, but these we will get answers from Stephen, and they will all be published on the website. There was a position.
Yep, sorry, going back to the question about can you link EIDR and GVMS?
Yes.
You can. All you need to do is put your approval number in GVMS.
Yeah.
And it works. Yeah.
Stephen,
Brilliant.
then thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
I am going to share your number, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of calls. So
Marvellous. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Just to let you know that the next Board of Operating Model iteration will clarify that thing about the IDR, just what we've been saying there, just to allay your concern.
Okay. I'm told that the next version of the border operating model will clarify that bit on EIDR, but I'm sure Ronnie's correct. Huh? Okay. Thanks very much, guys. This does feel like a bit of a reunion. I've got sort of all our sort of old speakers coming back. I mean, some are larger than life, and some are looking a hell of a lot fitter than the last time we saw them. So to talk to us about TSS, we have Shankar Singham, that has gone from being sort of a top businessman to a sportsman now, I understand. I mean...
Okay, so how do we do this? Okay. So, well, first of all, afternoon, and it's really good to be here in person after all these hundreds, it feels like, of seminars that we've done online. So what we're going to do is Shonali is going to talk first about some aspects of the program and where we are today. We thought it would be a good plan to share with you where TSS is today, and then I'll come in and talk about some of the specific functionality that we have and some sort of guidance for you, and then we can go into questions. We've got quite a long presentation in terms of numbers of slides, so we might rush through them, or we might skip over some of them, but they're available for everybody afterwards. So,
great. So hi, everyone. As Shankar said, I'm Shonali Jashani. I work as a consultant on the Fujitsu side of the TSS consortium. Shankar, Magda and I all work quite heavily within the stakeholder engagement piece of the TSS. So, really, really trying to understand traders' needs, pitch them back into the programme, make sure that the sort of technical side of TSS and the policy side all align in what is probably fair to say a constantly changing environment. So this is essentially what we're going to go through today. As Shanka said, there is probably a lot more material than we need to go through, and a lot of it is in previous webinars and stuff. So if there is anything we pick up on, please do visit some of the links in the slides, because there is a wealth of information on TSS. What is the actual TSS? What do we do? So it's worth noting the TSS is completely free to use. We were set up by HMRC in conjunction with the UK Gov to help with all of the new requirements that came in with the Northern Ireland Protocol on the 1st of January this year. It's worth noting that what the TSS essentially does is provide a declaration service digitally for all traders moving goods Great Britain into Northern Ireland. Everything is done online via our portal at thetradersupportservice.co.uk, and it was quite a big piece of work to make sure we moved as far away from sort of paper customs as we could, get everything recorded on the portal, drafts, submissions. It runs 24/7 to reflect the business needs of traders, of hauliers, so you don't need to be submitting things within the 9 to 5 business hours. One of our biggest focuses on the TSS was essentially the education piece. As we know, many of you in the room have been interacting with TSS, are huge traders, etc. But there's also that huge market of, the small to medium traders who've only ever traded within the UK, Ireland, France, etc., have never ever seen customs. And it was sort of that scale up of, what do these new requirements mean? What is the customs declaration? What do I need to do? Why do I need to do it? Where do I get the data, etc.? And then, when you add in complications like the food requirements, SPS requirements, you suddenly have a man with a van importing his cheese who suddenly has to do all of these things that they've never done before. So one of our biggest focuses was making sure that end-to-end journey through the ports, all the different declaration types really were supported by TSS. And as we said, and you'll see in a second, we support something like 44,000 registered traders now, which was well over the original estimate we thought of actual traders moving goods between GB and NI. So a really, really strong take-up. On that point, we store all of our education material on NICTA, which is the NI Customs and Trade Academy.co.uk. You'll see lots and lots of links throughout it. Please do visit it. Everything on NICTA is completely free. It's completely publicly available. And we've tried quite hard to do make customs in English. So, if there is any of the phrases used today, you'll sort of see lots of acronyms as well throughout this, or help tie together some of the concepts we've been talking about. Finally, what the last thing that TSS does do is kind of understand that even though we are doing everything digitally, if traders need that level of sort of human support, as the HMRC colleagues sort of spoke to earlier, there's a triage system of a contact centre. So we have hundreds of agents that have been stood up to kind of deal with inbound queries or cases that are raised sort of online via our portal. You have the tier ones who are kind of act as like call centre staff. You have your tier twos who have a few years of customs experience and they deal with the case management parts of the programme. And then these essentially get escalated up to our tier threes, which are specialist consultants. Most of them have 10, 20 years in-house experience. They're used to advising people on customs. And what they can generally tend to do is pull up declarations, run through them step by step, understand where things are going wrong, and essentially provide that much more hands-on support to all traders. So that's what the TSS does do. And then just a quick reminder, if there are some things we can't do, as I said, we do serve the entire market of traders moving goods between GB and Northern Ireland. We do it all for free as well, so it's just having to manage those expectations. So we do generally say, if you are looking for a more bespoke approach, you can reach out to the agent and intermediary market. There's a huge amount of support that's been stood up across the UK. And as you can see, sort of, in tiny print on the slide, eventually TSS will exit the market. It is set up on a temporary basis. So we just want to make sure that when TSS does exit, that there is that kind of a strong network of customs and trade support ready to kind of take on the new requirements. And finally, as we've seen throughout today, there are lots of extra things you need to do, whether these are CITES permits, export health certificates, shed forms, excise permits, anything like that. TSS cannot raise them for you, but we tell traders exactly where you need them, why you need them, where to obtain them, and where they fit in the TSS declaration process. So just a quick note on how it all happened. The bid sort of came out last summer. As you can see, the TSS consortium stepped in. We began work sort of in September, and the service went live on the 21st of December. So a really, really tight 3-month rollout, ready for when declarations kicked in on the 1st of January this year. As you can see, you have the sort of the various members of the consortium up there, and just a few sort of happy stats for you. Again, just sort of bearing in mind sort of the bigger picture, we sort of launched quite an aggressive engagement campaign to make sure people understood what the TSS was, what we could do, and that kind of spanned all trade associations across GB and Northern Ireland. Really just trying to, as we said, make sure that it was kind of a capture-all. We weren't just talking about the big businesses, it's also the really, really small traders, the really niche businesses, making sure they understood what was coming, why, and what you needed to do in order to declare on the TSS. As you can see, there's been hundreds of engagements. I think Shankar and I, our voices are sore. We do endless webinars, seminars, etc. You'll see our faces kind of dotted about, sadly, but it has been that, as I said, that extensive reach out to make sure that people understood how to use the TSS. I won't spend too long on these because you can read them at your leisure, but essentially, the TSS has had to ramp up really quickly. It's been a massive government project, but the best thing we can say is ultimately it is working. Bearing in mind the whole programme's been rolled out during COVID. Most of the consortium have never, ever met. Everything, as I said, still runs 24/7. We haven't had any outages, and we've now moved something like over 1 million consignments. We've raised over 2.5 million declarations, as we said, all in the COVID environment. So really, really pleased with the service that we've stood up. And something to draw your attention to, if you are traders who move goods in bulk volumes, or you move a lot of the same goods, you can use our upload API, which essentially allows TSS's tech to talk to your company databases, and we just push and pull the data, and in that way it gets rid of all the manual errors of the declarations, and we've had traders move something like 20,000 declarations on a weekend just to kind of start clearing through that backlog. So if you haven't already and you are interested, please do let us know, because the API is a really good tool. And again, just some more happy stats, which I'll let you read. And again, just some more happy stats. As you can see, we are really proud of the service that we've stood up, bearing in mind that, the Northern Ireland Protocol is kind of a very contentious environment, and there has been a lot of change for a lot of businesses, but we have seen kind of the tides are changing, people are kind of settling down, kind of understanding what they need to do, and a big part of what we've done on the TSS is try to make the declaration process, as you'll see in a second, as easy as it could be without obviously removing the requirement for them, and a lot of that is to do with service enhancements, copy and paste functionality. So once you've got a declaration right once, you can just keep replicating it on the system. So one thing, as I said, we really did want to sort of highlight is the fact that we are an evolving service. TSS now runs on releases that run on sort of an agile process of 6-week sprints. We've currently just delivered what was called Release 7 last week. There are scheduled to be a Release 8 before Christmas and a Release 9 next year. So you can kind of see it as that view of what do we need to enhance, what needs to be added in. And if anyone who does use the TSS, you'll see lots of new functionalities come in over the last few months around special procedures, rest of world imports, inventory linked ports. And essentially what we're trying to get to a point where TSS supports as many different declaration types for as many different types of journeys, bearing in mind it is still an interim service. So we've tried really hard to make sure it is at that kind of capture all environment. And as you can see, we're constantly engaging, constantly kind of trying to update people on what is changing in terms of the requirements, how has TSS responded to that, how can we help your business declare in the easiest way possible. And as you can see, these were sort of things that weren't in the original scope. So quite early on, things like SPS groupage. So if you were moving, for example, sets of fishes where you'd need catch certificates, export held for every single sort of batch of fish, it was sort of agreed early on, well, why don't you actually just have a single certificate that works for that whole groupage so that hauliers don't have to be carrying hundreds of thousands of documents and requiring lots of checks. So kind of being pragmatic within that sort of Northern Ireland context. And as you can see, consignment first was essentially just us saying, if you as the trader want to be able to add on your data and it not all rely on the haulier, as you'll see again in a second, you can log on, you can add in the consignment data, and then at any point later on your haulier can come in, add the vehicle data, and then that triggers through the rest of the declaration process. And you can see sort of a happy quote around the transit service, which was a massive piece of work, which now has been working for a number of months now, and as we said, continues to kind of get more diverse in what we can support there across the GBIE EU routes. So before I hand over to Shankar, just kind of a look at what the TSS process looks like. For people who aren't very familiar with all the acronyms that have been thrown, hopefully this will kind of help bring together what the MRNs and what GVMS does, at least in the GBNI context. So the TSS process focused on 3 declarations. You have your ENS, or the entry summary, the safety and security declaration, which essentially is required here because Northern Ireland forms part of the EU security zone. We then chose to split the customs import declaration into 2 halves. So you have your simplified frontier declaration and then your supplementary declaration. And you'll see kind of how the flow works in a second. We have, in the last few months, also released functionality. So if you did wish to do it all up front, you could do a full frontier declaration also. So as you can see here, this is a slightly nicer way of looking at it. And I'll apologise now for the amount of acronyms. There's just not enough space on a page otherwise. So once you've kind of understood all of your trading terms, and this is sort of one of the points we really try hammering with traders, is because of the way the TSS model has been set up, we focus on the buyer, or the NI buyer being the importer of record here. So our model is essentially set up with them being the importer of record, paying the duties, generally being the person who interacts with TSS the most. But of course, if you move goods under an Incoterm such as DDP, delivered duty paid, or DAP, delivered at place, it will be your GB supplier that's responsible. So we kind of try to make sure that is kind of understood, because it will be whoever's EORI number gets locked in at that stage. It's where TSS will keep contacting you to complete the declaration. So it's just really important to get those roles and responsibilities locked in. What then happens is TSS actually put a lot of the burden on the haulier. So we then say, your haulier can log in and complete the safety and security as they would perhaps typically completing the declaration with the vehicle details, but they'll also include a basic description of the goods and the EORI numbers of the supplier and the buyer. That's really important because TSS then uses that. We submit that to ICS, and we use the exact same data set to automatically complete the Simplified Frontier Declaration for traders. So essentially, as you can see, we've tried to streamline that as much as we can, so that some traders have never even seen an SFD because simply they don't need to. The system automates it all. We then submit that off to CDS, which is the customs system operating in Northern Ireland. And if both of those are cleared, you then get the movement reference numbers, or the MRNs, which we feed back to the trader and haulier via the portal. And then, as you've seen sort of colleagues talk about, at that point, the haulier can then log on to GVMS, add in both of those movement reference numbers, so one for the security declaration, one for the simplified frontier, and at that point GVMS will validate, confirm that compliance has been done, and the goods can kind of continue on the rest of the delivery. The haulier will get sort of to the ferry port, will provide the GMR, which is a barcode, and at that point delivery can continue, and the trader will then get a ping from TSS saying, we know that barcode has been scanned, your goods have moved, you have until the 4th working day of the following month to log back on and complete your supplementary declaration and pay any duties. And then just a reminder, if you wanted to do the FFD, all of that's just done up front instead. And I think I can hand over to you now.
Okay, thanks very much, Shanoli. What we wanted to focus a bit of attention on, and before I go any further, just let me, for questions, we have not only myself and Shanali, but also Magda's over there. Many of you will know Magda, and any HMRC-related questions can be deferred to Ellie Patterson over there. So knowing your tariff options is absolutely crucial. We found that because of the way we've structured the system, a lot of the traders, a lot of the importers, who didn't actually see the SFD, only have to sort of make this deliberation about what's the best tariff option when it comes time to do the supplementary declaration. So, and it's really important, we keep repeating this, that you get your customers to really do the homework in terms of the supplementary declaration, and not to start the process of just filling in forms and filling in the boxes before you actually done the homework. So broadly speaking, if the EU, these are the 4 checks that we suggest you go through. So first of all, if the EU common external tariff is 0, then your goods are not going to pay, obviously, any duty. You use the NIREM code when you fill in the supplementary declaration, and that ensures that you don't get any duty payment required of you when it comes time to do the supplementary declaration. The UK trader scheme, and this is becoming ever more important, if anything, and we've said from the beginning that this is crucial. If you can be on the UK trader scheme, if your goods are moving not at risk, you need to be applying for the UK trader scheme. We have been somewhat surprised from the beginning of this, the relatively low numbers of people who are on the UK trader scheme. We understand the reasons for that. We understand there have been some difficulties there. But there is, and the major difficulty, I guess, was the permanent establishment requirement in Northern Ireland for, if you're a DDP trader. That has been temporarily eased. That temporary easement is sort of indefinite, at least until the current negotiations conclude in whatever way they do conclude. But what is very clear, and it's even clearer now, if you even if you read the command paper from the UK government, if you read the EU non-papers on customs, it's very clear that not at risk will be easier for you to do this process, and therefore just really plugging the UK trader scheme if you can qualify for it. If you can't qualify for it, and I'll talk about what might prevent you from qualifying for it in a moment, but if you can't qualify for it, then you are going to have to check the preferential tariffs in terms of the UK-EU TCA to see if you can actually benefit from the preferential tariff of zero. And here the issue is going to be rules of origin. As you all know, the rules of origin under the EU-UK TCA are, and we heard this morning actually in the presentation, somewhat more restrictive than other trade agreements you might find, and therefore you may not qualify for the preferential tariff if, for example, you don't have the requisite local content, depending on the specific rules in the specific chapters or specific annexes of the trade agreement. There is also a duty waiver under the European, under the state aids rules. So there's a de minimis threshold where you can claim the waiver even if your goods are at risk. And what we say to this is why this is a bit more like a decision engine than a decision tree. So it's not that you would sequentially go through this necessarily. If you are a small trader and you can benefit from the waiver, and it can really solve most of your problem. What we're saying to people is we don't want you to go through some complex, rule of origin analysis. Although I'm looking at Eve here, and probably would want you to go through a complex rule of origin analysis. But we're saying don't make your very small trader go through that process. Just claim the waiver if it applies. So registration for the UK trader scheme, if you can demonstrate your goods are not at risk and you meet the qualification criteria, then you can register for the UK trader scheme. And the critical thing there is, first of all, you've got to be able to show control. You've got to be able to show that the goods are in fact ending in Northern Ireland. They have to be sold to. This is the current rule, notwithstanding what you might have read in the newspapers about command paper and negotiations. This is the current situation. They have to be sold to or provided for final use by end consumers located in Northern Ireland. Or they need to be for internal UK trade, which could be elsewhere in the UK. But essentially, for those movements that are moving entirely within the UK customs territory, that's what the UK trader scheme is for. Now, those people who applied before February of 2021 got their provisional authorisation. There was then a 4-month process where you'd have a sort of full authorisation or a full review by HMRC. So if you apply now, you're going to be in the full review process by HMRC. And we've got some guidance there that we've scattered throughout the presentation. We've got links to gov.uk guidance, and we've got links to guidance that's on the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy website, which is the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy run by the Institute of Exports, our consortium partner, is the source of information and training for all Northern Ireland GB, NIGB and transit movements through Irish ports. So, what are the what are the criteria to be on the UK trader scheme? So, the initial rule was that you had to be established in Northern Ireland, or you had to have a fixed place of business in Northern Ireland, or you could meet these other criteria, including using an indirect representative in Northern Ireland. The TSS obviously is an indirect representative. We indirectly represent everybody. Quite a big statement, but thanks to our work with our HMRC colleagues, we've managed to make that work. And that's why we have the CFSP style, SFD to supplementary declaration process for everybody. And just to repeat on that point, because there've been some questions about this, the reason for that in the beginning was to ensure that we didn't have a truck stopped at port situation in Liverpool or in other UK ports, that the people would be able to move through the ports smoothly, because obviously if there are errors, they're likely to be in the supplementary declaration, not in the SFD. So you have to follow those. There's a temporary easement, obviously, on the permanent establishment in Northern Ireland requirement. You do have to have good customs and tax compliance record. And this is important in all aspects of what we're doing here. It is important to comply with these rules, because if you don't, then it may have implications for you in other areas where you may need something. You may decide you want to have use a customs warehouse, or you may need other things, and generally your compliance record is going to matter. You've got to be able to show that the goods that you got final sale to the sale to a consumer in Northern Ireland, or final use by end consumers in Northern Ireland, and if you are a commercial processor, then the general principle is you can't be on the UK trader scheme. Those goods are not moving at risk, subject to these exceptions for things like food and medical products and healthcare and so on. In addition, there is a very small processor exception. If you're below a particular turnover of £500,000 a year, you'll be able to be a small commercial processor, and you can still be not at risk. You can still be on the UK trader scheme. And that's some information about authorization and how you apply at the bottom of the slide. So you've got to be authorized in order to use the scheme. You then use the NIREM code on your TSS supplementary declaration, and that will mean that you don't pay the EU import duty. You've got to remember that you've got to maintain evidence of that control of your sale to consumers or business use in Northern Ireland for 5 years. And you won't be able to use this if you can't provide that evidence. So commercial processing. If you move goods that are subject to processing into Northern Ireland, then you need to meet these additional criteria. I mentioned the £500,000 small processor exemption. There are certain sectors that are approved as an exception to the general rule that you can't be on the UK trader scheme if you are a processor. And those approved sectors are food, construction, provision of healthcare services, not-for-profit activities, or final use of animal feed or on premises in Northern Ireland by the importer. There is a mechanism called apportionment, where if you are bringing product in to Northern Ireland and some of it is at risk of going to Ireland, you are not thereby precluded from benefiting from the UK trader scheme. You can apportion your goods, and you can make a declaration on the basis of the percentage that's not at risk versus the percentage that is at risk. But in order to use apportionment, you are going to have to be able to have a track record. So you can't, if what you're bringing in changes dramatically from year to year, then you're probably not going to be able to use apportionment. So you've got to be able to establish that you can show that over the last period of time, your percentage of not at risk versus at risk has not really changed very much. So we're talking about established patterns of trading. And when you do your application for the UK trader scheme, especially if you're doing it now, and you intend to use apportionment, then you need to make that known to HMRC when you actually make your application. And if you are already approved and you now want to use apportionment for whatever reason, then you need to let HMRC know that as well. As I said, you've got to notify HMRC of your intent to use it. You've got to have stable supply chains, and typically we're talking about within 10%. It doesn't have to be exactly the same percentage every year, but within roughly 10% is the kind of thing that we're looking for, and you've got to be able to provide evidence. So I'll go over the backlog fairly quickly. I mean, obviously there is a supplementary declaration backlog. There are various tranches of backlog. We've been working with traders to work through their backlog of supplementary declarations. We've made quite quite a lot of progress in this area. Recently, Shanali mentioned the API, and we've been able to use the API to clear people's supplementary declarations quite rapidly. If you are having trouble with backlog of supplementary declarations, reach out to us, reach out to any of us. We'll put a team around you, and we will get that done for you. Then the waiver, essentially the de minimis amount of state aid is €200,000 over 3 fiscal years. There are lower allowances for some different sectors, so it's not always €200,000 over the 3 fiscal years, but for standard goods it's €200,000 for that period. In order to claim the waiver, obviously you have to have an EORI number. You've got to submit details on the online form, which we've put a link to there. And typically, if you're looking at industrial goods, you're looking at goods that have a tariff of maybe, let's say, 4% as just a number on the back of an envelope. You're probably talking about if you're under the £1.5 million per year imports into Northern Ireland, then you're in this ballpark. This is the kind of thing that you need to start thinking about. If you're substantially above that, then this is of less value. We have a supplementary declaration assistant that allows people to clear the backlog of supplementary declarations, and you can use, if it's applicable to you, you can use that supplementary declaration assistant on a going forward basis as well to sort of help you do your declarations. It's a bulking tool, which is a UCC tool. It's a UCC provision that it's based on. The only issue you need to consider is that under the UCC, if you are bulking, you bulk at the highest commodity code. So if you're bulking a number of different commodity codes and you've got one that's quite a high tariff, this may not be the right thing for you if you're using it going forward on at-risk declarations. But remember, this is where the tool bulking and the UK trader scheme come together to be quite a powerful mechanism for clearing your supplementary declarations quickly. Is that obviously that's a movement within the UK customs territory. There's no duty, so therefore you have all the benefits of the facilitation without any of the burdens of what would normally happen in terms of a tariff. So if you haven't gone through the supplementary declaration assistant and you think that could be useful for you, again, please contact us. We'll put a team around you and we'll do that for you. In terms of decision engines, this is still a work in progress that we are refining, but this is kind of the analysis you need to sort of go through, and we call them deliberately decision engines because it's not entirely a sequential, either or situation or flow diagram, but the easiest way to sort of talk about it is to put it down in this fashion. So Shanali also mentioned that we have a number of releases that we've been coming out with. Release 7 came out last Wednesday, I think. Release 8 is due to come out in December, possibly. So we don't have full functionality for everything as of, certainly from the beginning of the TSS program, we were building functionality. So the first question is the procedure currently supported by TSS? If it's not, then you do ask the question about whether the EU's external tariff, common external tariff is 0. But that does include, that's the applied EU tariff. So if there is a trade remedy on there, and if there is an additional tariff, then you need to, that's got to be included as well. And if yes, you complete the full supplementary declaration. If you are supported by TSS functionality, then you would hold completion. If the answer to the question, are you not supported, is yes, in other words, there isn't functionality, then what we're saying is you hold the supplementary declaration until the functionality is fully available. So if you're making a good faith effort, the bottom line is this: if you're making a good faith effort to do your supplementary declarations, If you're having problems, you've dealt with the TSS team, you're working with us on it, no one is going to come beating your door down about your supplementary declarations. The only concern are people who haven't done anything at all, for whom functionality does exist. But if there isn't functionality, you can't do your supplementary declaration, so you can hold them. So going on to the other checks, so assuming that the procedures are currently supported by TSS, you check first of all the zero tariff, and if the EU common external tariff is zero. If it's not, and it won't be for most things, are you under the preference? If you're not under the preference, can you be registered on the UK trader scheme? If you do benefit from the preference, can you then use the supplementary declaration assistant to complete the supplementary declaration quickly? If you can't, you're going to have to do the full supplementary declaration. If you're registered on the UKTS, if you can be registered, if you qualify, then you can use the supplementary declaration assistant again, and that's a rapid process. If you can't, you do your full declaration. If you are intending to apply for the UK trader scheme, and again, for the smaller traders, just to repeat, it may be that the waiver is what you want to use, and if you want to use the waiver, you put in the NI aid code in your supplementary declaration. If you're not intending to apply for the UK trader scheme, you look for any other measures. So in this world, you're not able to use the UK trader scheme. You're not able to use a preferential tariff of the EU-UK TCA. And let's say you're not a small trader, you can't benefit from the waiver, or the waiver doesn't really help you in terms of the tariff you have to pay. What else can you do in that situation? Well, what you can do is you can use special customs procedures. So you want to investigate whether that actually makes sense for you. And there is functionality now in TSS that supports the full frontier declaration, that supports the special customs procedures. And there is also functionality on TSS, the full frontier declaration, that supports the return goods relief. And return goods relief is a very important tool that you may need. Now, I will say that we had been, our analysis suggested a lot of people should be using return goods relief. A lot of people are not using return goods relief right now. Now, I know that there are issues associated with understanding, producing the evidence that you need in order to use return goods relief. The custom status in the EU as it comes into GB, and then the evidence you need in terms of invoices and so forth. And you need to make this decision, because you're going to have to do this on a full frontier declaration. You need to make this decision before the goods move. Before they move from GB to NI. And we understand that may have caused some issues for people to take this up. But I think if you're paying a tariff, and we are going to go out to those traders very shortly, I think, of those who have paid a tariff, to say very specifically, is RGR the kind of thing for you? And I will say that HMRC has developed a way of allowing you to use RGR that is very facilitated. I mean, I'm also looking around, from other ways of using RGR in Europe. It's a very facilitated way. They've sort of gone as far as they can really go. It's important that traders take advantage of this. So you've got to do that sort of calculation in your own mind. But RGR is a solution to the tariff question. I mean, it's particularly a solution to those movements that we see a lot of, that were referred to this morning, where we have the movement from the EU to GB, secondary movement from GB to Northern Ireland. You've got to pay a tariff. You've lost UK origin if you move into free circulation in GB. And, you need to be thinking about RGR in that context. If none of this works, then, or if a customs warehouse or an IP process doesn't make sense, is not appropriate for the trader, then a duty is payable, and obviously it would have to be paid. And then you would also ask, finally, can I lower it by using NI aid to use the waiver? But you are in that environment going to have to do, you're going to have to make a duty payment with your supplementary declaration. So key points for the supplementary declaration are, we got a lot of links there to TSS guidance, to guidance in the Northern Ireland Customs Trade Academy. These are the codes that you need to use. I'm going to take you back to the header page that you need to fill in, which is the NI-DOM versus NI-IMP. NI-DOM is what you use for goods moving GB to NI in free circulation, NI-IMP for goods moving under special procedures. And then once you're doing the supplementary declaration, the NI-REM or the NI-AID code, depending on which way you're going to go. And then there's lots of supplementary declaration videos and training and material. And I think there's also now a video with Shonali and Magda walking you through the UKTS application. So we've got that in place as well. So what's new? As I mentioned, special customs procedures is on there now, all using the full frontier declaration. Very conscious that there are some traders, specifically Northern Ireland Aerospace and Defence, and we are talking to these sectors very closely at the moment, who use the SFD into special procedure without supplementary declaration. And they need to be able to do that, and our functionality as it currently is does not yet allow that, but we are soon it will come, and then we will be able to do that. So for those traders, if you are in that category, well, first of all, if you're in that category, please let us know, because we or if you have customers who are in that category, we want to figure out who those people are, but you can hold the supplementary declaration until that functionality is in place. So we do support customs warehousing, inward processing, outward processing, as I mentioned, RGR, temporary admission, and the authorized use provisions that are associated with some of those processes. So just where we are right now, obviously at the end of August we did release 6, which it was important because it was Air ILP. Well, it was important for lots of reasons, but Air ILP was a big one, and Air Inventory Link Pools. This is rest of world into Northern Ireland Air. We do support that now, as of late August. Now we know that the chief to CDS migration deadline is the 31st of October. I will say that we have not had any movements. We were hoping that we would have some movements by now. So if you have people who are sort of waiting for the 31st of October migration deadline, we just strongly encourage you not to wait to the last moment, and to actually, it's there, the functionality exists. If there are problems, and these are new things, there always will be problems, we can fix them early. So really important that you do that. Release 7, and we also in Release 6, supported special customs procedures on the full frontier declaration. We haven't had massive take-up of the full frontier declaration. This is despite being told by the trade that the full frontier declaration was super required, and we needed to put alternate customs procedures in place, which we have done. The reason I say that is because each sprint, so Shonali mentioned it's a 6-week sprint to each release, there's a lot that people want in each sprint. You just remember that we stood up TSS in about 2 months, and with sequential functionality that we had to introduce. So the space in each of these releases is very, very tight. And we need to prioritize the things that people actually really need. So if we hear from you that you really need it, and then we do it and no one uses it, it kind of means that something else that you might not need, which could have been put in, didn't get put in. And so we want to work with the trade to really understand what it is you need. We have a very, very active trade facilitation group within TSS that is pushing constantly on the build team to give you what you all want. So it really helps us to be able to deliver something that then gets used, because then we can say, yeah, we told you that the trade needs this, and so we do want to see that happens. And then Release 7. Release 7 was slightly delayed, so it came out actually last Wednesday, and that includes maritime ILP. So this is rest of world into Northern Ireland for into Belfast Harbour, into the Irish ports, and again, same chief to CDS migration deadline, which is the 31st of October, which is not very far away, we have maritime ILP functionality in place, and we have not seen any use of it. I think we've seen no use of it. So people are waiting, obviously, until the last moment. If there's a problem, it's going to be a problem if you don't do it early. So if you've got customers in this space, please get them to start the process. We can work through any kinks that exist. We also have released in last Wednesday, and this is again something that you guys really wanted, and we've given it to you. Des will be very happy that agents and intermediaries now have. They now can have their own accounts on TSS, and that came in, I guess, Thursday, shall we say. So we've had some take-up. We've had 7 agents and intermediaries now with their own accounts on TSS, representing 73 different traders. But again, so if you ask for it, you've got a couple in the test environment as well. Excellent. We just please use it as much as you can, and there's more functionality around agents and intermediaries that's able to come out. So if there are things that are we know that there are certain issues with it, that it's not absolutely perfect, it does need further work. Let us know what that is. And then release 8 and 9. Release 8 and 9. There's a little bit of uncertainty at the moment with respect to Northern Ireland. We're not entirely sure exactly when Release 8, therefore, is going to come out, and we certainly aren't very sure about when Release 9 is going to come out. But we will continue to provide that extra functionality for special customs procedures, including, for example, the SFD into customs warehouse. So we will be doing that. Now, Release 9, there will be a release that will deal with what happens as a result of the negotiations or discussions or whatever you want to call them that are happening now. So that will capture what that is. And obviously, as you know, I'm not saying anything that you don't already know. I mean, there's 2 potential scenarios. There's a negotiated outcome scenario, and then there's the Article 16 command paper scenario. So we'll be ready for either of those scenarios. It is important to notice that even in an Article 16 command paper scenario, you read the command paper, it doesn't mean there will be no process. What we do know is the at-risk process, the process for GB/NI at risk will largely remain the same. There are some very important differences between the command paper and what a negotiated solution might lead to. And you can also read the EU non-papers and form your own view of what a negotiated solution might therefore look like. But we certainly will be providing a release that enables you to deal with whichever of those outcomes we end up with. And again, link to the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy, the website, and all of the material that we have there. And I think that is it.
Thank you. If I could just reiterate what Shanker has said. We've had a couple of members that have not had that functionality hasn't been available within TSS. And TSS, we've actually sort of spoken to them. They pulled in HMRC, and we've had that confirmation that the whole process is delayed, and there'll be no sort of HMRC action as long as you sort of are making the effort to make that supplementary declaration. So that has been great, and I do appreciate that. The development, your guys have also been good with a lot that we've asked for. Obviously, on the full frontier decks and so on, you've been asking at the wrong forums. If you'd asked us, you would have been told what was needed. But we do have a couple of guys that are starting to struggle now. What you spoke about was the not at risk goods. It's the at risk goods that are starting to worry us.
Yeah.
The declarations that we're making into TSS are being made into CDS, so they're essentially a UK declaration. If we pay duty there, what happens to that duty? Do you pay it over to? How does it get to the EU, and how do we account for the VAT? That is the bit that is really starting to worry us, is what is going to happen with that VAT. There's no declaration being made into the EU, and could the EU essentially deem those goods as uncleared and say, no, we're grabbing these goods, they're liable to forfeiture.
No, so they couldn't do that because it's part of the Northern Ireland Protocol and they've agreed, so at least until something changes. But there is one part of your question that is important. I'm going to ask Ellie to answer it, which is passing the buck there nicely. But it is the reimbursement question, and people have asked us a lot about reimbursement. So I don't know if Ellie, you want to just say something about
Can
that,
I give you
it does come up a lot. So.
Thank you, Des. So there was quite a lot to that question. So the first part of it is the declaration that you make for goods that are at risk on entry to Northern Ireland, where those goods perhaps are moving into the EU after they have been into Northern Ireland. So under the terms of the protocol, you make that declaration to HMRC as the UK Customs Authority, because although the goods are going on into the EU, the point that they enter the EU's customs territory is upon entry to Northern Ireland. So you make that declaration to HMRC as the UK's customs authority, and you pay any duty payment to HMRC as the UK customs authority. Under the terms of the protocol, all of the customs duty that is paid under the Northern Ireland Protocol requirements is retained by the UK government. It's not passed over to the EU, but that is one of the many things that was agreed as part of the protocol and the withdrawal agreement and part of the separation agreement between the UK and the EU. So the reason you don't see any of that happening is because it doesn't. Your declaration requirement, if your goods first enter in Northern Ireland, is with the UK authority. Your payment is to the UK authority, and that's that. So if you have paid the right duty at the right time to the UK tax authority, then there won't be any. The EU won't be looking for that payment later on. As Shankar has mentioned, it might be that you've paid duty on goods that are at risk, but you can later demonstrate that they remained within the UK. And there has been work going on about the potential for a reimbursement process, that if you could later prove that the goods stayed in the UK, you could then seek a reimbursement of that duty. That reimbursement process is still under review, so I don't have an update at this time on what that might look like and when it may become available. I will say that we as HMRC have been feeding up to government that is really important for some businesses who are unable to use the options that Shankar talked through in his presentation and are paying duty now on goods that go into Northern Ireland, but they might later be able to demonstrate that they didn't enter the EU and therefore they are not a risk to the single market. The last part of your question was about VAT. So the way it works under the Northern Ireland Protocol is we have used flexibilities within the VAT legislation and the VAT directives. So instead of paying your import VAT as part of your customs declaration processes, you pay your VAT as if it were a domestic movement in most cases. The challenge comes if your goods are going to a customer who is in the EU, because they will end up, the person sending the goods will charge VAT and they will include that as output tax on their UK VAT declaration. However, if the recipient of that goods is a business, say in Ireland, they cannot claim that VAT as input tax because it's not been charged to them by a business that is registered for VAT in Ireland or the EU. So they would need to use the EU VAT refund mechanism in order to reclaim that VAT. So one of the functionalities that is available through TSS and that businesses are thinking about using is what's called onward supply relief, which provides relief against the VAT at the time of the customs declaration process, and then this is accounted for later on by the recipient of the goods in the EU. So the VAT position is different to how it would normally work in international trade.
Are you saying we'd have to go under the 13th directive to recover the VAT or not?
So if you're a GB business selling goods to I'm going to use Ireland as the example because it's the simplest. If you're a GB business selling goods to a business in Ireland and you're sending the goods, they are physically travelling via Northern Ireland, you would either need to use onward supply relief to claim relief from that VAT at the time the goods enter Northern Ireland, or you would have to make a reclaim under the VAT directive.
Have you ever tried to get money back under the 13th Act?
So I understand that getting money back under the 13th Act directive is not the easiest process. So that is why businesses may want to consider using an onward supply relief claim as part of their declaration into Northern Ireland. I think, Shankar, that is something that the TSS does, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, we do support that as of.
Yeah.
Thank you for that bad news.
So and just to build on that, legally, the reason on the duty side of things is that once your good has, we've basically got a boundary inside the customs territory. So that's an entirely UK matter with respect to HMRC and the trader. And once your good is in Northern Ireland, then it is subject to the free circulation within the island of Ireland provisions of the protocol. So no one can, if the Irish Revenue Commission starts coming to you making demands, then I'd like to know that, because that should not be happening.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just the VAT is something that is
and we do, yeah. So we do have onward supply relief available, and there is guidance and training on how to use it in NICTA at the moment.
Any other questions?
With regard to the Northern Ireland CDS system, how is it aligned to the future UK CDS system? Are they the same underlying database? Or
So do you mean the ICS? So the Northern Ireland system is the ICS system, and
CDS,
that's the.
Talking about
It's the same. So it's CDS.
So the development that you do in Northern Ireland, so when the CDS is implemented fully in the UK next year, it will be on the same basis.
It's the same. It's the same system.
So what you're developing now will obviously help.
Yeah.
For
I think so.
the CDS version, which we get in the UK, and hopefully iron out all the problems so we get a perfect system.
Well, I'm not sure we're going to get a perfect system, but I will say though that when we started doing supplementary declarations, I won't say the percentage, but the error rate was quite high. It has gone down significantly. So CDS is a different system, and it's in many ways you could look at it and say it's not as forgiving a system as Chief, and people have to get used to it. People have to sort of learn how to use it. But what we're seeing, we've done a lot of things that I think will be very helpful going forward. We produced a sort of manual that looks at all the potential errors, because the errors come back in the form of language that no one can understand, and we've produced a sort of explanatory guide to what that all means and how to deal with it. So I think there's a lot of material actually on the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy website with regards specifically to CDS that you should look at even if you're not doing anything in Northern Ireland, because it might be helpful in understanding how to use the system.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Question about the API upgrades. So there was an API upgrade last week, as you've alluded to. Unfortunately, that's meant that we've had an issue with our declaration since then. They've all failed because there wasn't a data element in there. It's not so much a question, just more of a request. Can we have something within the next upgrades which mean that the previous ones just don't fail? If we don't need the new functionality, can we just make sure that the upgrades don't knock out the previous versions?
Yeah. So that's a tricky question, because the problem is that the API just follows the portal. So where there are rule changes, or where there are things that were the case before, and this is particularly true of things like how your approach to standard goods versus controlled goods and that sort of thing, where we're implementing new things that ensure we bring people into compliance. We don't have any flexibility there. So we've essentially given you an API following a portal that was very easy to use, and now we have to bring people into compliance, and that does mean that there are changes to both the portal and the API. So I don't know, we can talk later about that, and I can be a bit clearer about what I mean. But Magda, do you want to say something about the API?
We need you on the record, Magda.
Be careful what you say.
I'll be very careful what I'm saying. So for the API users, we do send separate notifications when the changes are supposed to be going to, but quite likely you won't get it as with your usual TSS emails. It will be sent to the main API contact So I know the notifications were being sent. I think you were referring to the declaration type field that was added. That's the one, yes. So we've sent a notification. If you have not received it, or if your API contact didn't receive it, then just let us know and we'll see who should the notification be going to and change it for you as well if needed.
Okay, I guess the point is more around the fact that there's a lot of development that goes into making sure that we're...
Yeah, I appreciate that, yeah.
Constant drip of changes. It means that we're constantly spending money on development.
Okay, it's not a constant drip of changes. I think this hopefully will be it on the API. I think we're at 2.0.
Yes. So normally you will get a notification about 2 weeks before the plan change, and we implement the changes to the test system first, so that traders can review and make sure that the API carries on working. And the way you can implement it within the test, you can implement it straight into the live as well. So any new fields that you are adding, they'll carry on being ignored until the new version comes into live, so you can implement the change as quickly as you want.
Yeah, that is a complaint that we've had from a couple of the developers, that the next version overwrites the previous version and they've got to start with the development again. So very good point. I mean, it's something that's been brought up quite often.
Yeah, there's some legal reasons why we have to do it that way, but...
Any other questions?
Fitbit's going to be good. Thank you. So I was just very interested by the point about the UK keeps its duties. Ellie, does presumably the EU keeps the UK duties that go into Dublin then, or whatever? Is that the sort of?
When you import goods into Dublin, you're importing your goods into the EU, so you pay normal duty to the Irish.
Yes. Yeah. So that sort of equates then, that explains why that is. So just wonder, we keep talking about duties and there's been analysis on the RGR side of things. So Ellie or Shankar, how much duties have been paid so far this year? How much is it? I mean, is it really worth getting worried about, or is it really not that much money, or is it quite a bit of money? Are you able to let us know without a...
Sure, I don't think we can let you know that. I'm getting
request for disclosure or something.
Shaking head from Ellie. Let me answer that question as well as I can, because I can't tell you what that number is. But it is very obvious that the EU-UK TCA has quite restrictive rules of origin, and we have this secondary movement issue for goods coming from EU into GB and Northern Ireland. So you would expect that there would be duties payable, that it isn't a case that, there's no duty because the EU-UK TCA is 0, so I don't have to worry about any of this. There are duties that are being paid, and you know, if you're paying the duty, then for you it's a big problem. So that's why we're spending so much effort to try to make sure that this is actually, you know, where a trader doesn't have to pay the duty that is being knocked out.
Okay, and so how do we find out at the end of the year? Do we have to get a parliamentary, get Peter Lilly to ask us, you know?
Well, Peter Lilly's here, so he can...
Could we stick that at the list, Peter?
You can summon us to testify before you and so forth. There you go.
Shankar, thank you very, very much. We got one more speaker.
Yep, thank you.
So I'm hoping you guys are going to sort of stay around for the next sort of half an hour, possible, just to...
yeah, just for...
yeah. And then we can... So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much.
Shanali, thank you. CDS is something that is worrying us all, and we do have a gentleman here that is runs the Association of Freight Software Suppliers. So, Mr. Bartlett, I mean, please tell us what we need to know about CDS. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for the invitation and saving me till last. So hopefully you will uplift all your spirits with an update on CDS. I'll move this forward, just the next one. Okay, so I just thought, my name is Steve Bartlett. I'm the chairman of the AFSS. I just thought to spend a couple of minutes just explaining what the association that I represent is, and just the sort of members that I have. So we represent all the leading suppliers of the software to the freight and transportation industry, and we are recognised by HMRC and HMG for this. And we currently have about 45 different members, which really does capture the vast majority of all the software suppliers in this particular space. So a lot of these companies you've probably heard of, maybe some of you use already, but I represent them in front of these bodies. So what is it that they do? So they do a number of things. They do sort of customs management as a title is what sort of things that they do. So and which is one of the reasons I'm here today to talk about CDS. So import and export declarations into customs declaration systems. They do product classification, compliance. Their software pre-calculates duty and VAT, and some of them have tariff viewers and helpers. But it's not just customs integration. They also do software that relates to warehouse management, so inventory, loading, transport and freight management, things like that, cost management, pricing, that sort of thing. And also supply chain collaboration with monitoring and scheduling and things like that. So most of my members have a customs and logistics offerings, but some of my members do specialise. So I do have members who specialise in infrastructure, so that's hardware and things like that for the freight industry. And we also have some who do tariff applications, process automation and robotics and data analytics. So it's not just all about talking to customs systems. So that's what we do. So what I would do is give you a very quick update on our view on where we are currently with CDS. And so this is the view of all the software providers that I've mentioned. So as we've been working a long time with HMRC on CDS, so I thought it'd be useful just to give you a little brief potted history as to for those who might not be aware as to why CDS is actually coming along and replacing Chief. Chief is an old legacy platform. Has a defined shelf life. It's sitting on old infrastructure. The ability to get to programmers to support the Chief is increasingly difficult. And it doesn't fit in with HMRC's and HMG's model for a future vision of an integrated border system. So the scope of the project is huge. I mean, and it has a lot of dependencies on other government departments and governments and .gov systems, as well as the trade connectivity is extensive, and as a result, it does require a great high degree of performance and reliability to make it work. Especially as we've left the EU and the sheer number of declarations being put through the system is now considerably more. So people have perhaps been a little sceptical about when CDS is coming, and I'm not surprised because if you look at the potted history of CDS, originally announced in 2015, it was going to be delivered in 2017, and then by 2016 that slipped to 2019, and so on and so on and so on. So we're now at a current position where that has been communicated by HMRC to us at a couple of months ago. So imports, the migration will be complete to CDS by the end of September 2022. And for exports, the migration will be complete by the 30th of March 2023. In terms of Chief itself, it will be closed to all declarations from the 1st of April 23 and actually be shut down from July 2023. Now, we are not expecting these dates to change. We kind of, as an industry, we hope that they won't change because we've been working with CDS a very long time, and every delay that we have means additional effort and development work on my members that they have to do to continually try to roll this out. So, that's the current plan. So, where are we with that sort of plan? So, in summary, I would say that the majority of my members, the software developers, will have a CDS product ready for traders to migrate to, certainly for imports by the end of or the late 2021. So at the end of this year, there are some technical issues that remain, and we are working closely with HMRC to address these issues. So we do have regular contact and reviews with HMRC to isolate all the issues that we're seeing, whether that's in functionality that's yet to be delivered or bugs in the system and that sort of thing. So that's really for imports. For exports, the story is slightly different. Exports a lot of work has largely not even started for exports. And it's relatively untested and not developed yet. So consequently, in discussion with HMRC, that's why we've got a slightly longer rollout time for exports on CDS. We are concerned currently about the level of live support that we get from HMRC, and that is something we are obviously working with them to try to improve, because some of our software developers their queries and issues, including on some of the live systems, that are not being addressed quick enough. Some queries and some problem tickets are taking weeks to resolve, which is just not acceptable. So we're working with them to try to improve that. So in terms of the software, we're working with HMRC to try and resolve what's left to do, and we are certainly fairly confident that if HMRC deliver what they say they're going to deliver, we will have a product ready for the end of the year. I would say that the greater concern for us is really about the trade's ability and willingness perhaps to move to CDS, and I think this is something that Shankar certainly echoed on in his talk. There's no doubt CDS is more difficult. It's harder to do. The declarations take longer to complete. There's more data to gather. It's a new system. It's more complex. The tariff guidance and lookup is certainly more time consuming. And this is something we're trying to work with HMRC to try to resolve. The information on .gov is very confusing and sometimes inaccurate. I think, as has been mentioned before, we get ambiguous error messages. So when we get, if a declaration goes through and it fails, it doesn't always tell you why it's failed. It doesn't point to where the problem lies. And so we're trying to sort of iron out some of those. As I mentioned before, .gov UK is difficult to navigate for help and guidance. And also, as well as the software developers being ready with their CDS product, there is also a lot of downstream changes to traders' own systems that need to be prepared and readied for CDS. So that work has to be done. And all of this is time consuming and it's difficult, and we are concerned about the level of preparedness of the trade to move to CDS. Of course, all of this isn't helped by full controls from January 22. There's lots more things to do. There's even work for my members on software systems to get us ready for the end of this year. These are all very much a distraction to us, as well as obviously COVID and the global supply chain issues. All these sorts of things are not helping and distracting us from what we need to do. So really, what are the next steps? So we are very strong with HMRC that they must deliver the agreed fixes and the missing functionalities by the plan that they've published. We need to make sure that they deliver what they say they're going to deliver when at the right time, so that we can actually do the testing and the changes that we need to do to get ready for this deadline at the end of September or September next year for imports. And we feel that traders really must start to their own preparations and ready to migrate to CDS. You need to understand the changes. You need to undertake training for your staff. As I mentioned before, you need to review anything that might affect your own IT systems. And with EU exit and CDS, the sheer quantity of work and the sheer quantity of declarations you're having to do nowadays is going to be significantly more, up to sort of 6 times more potentially. So we really need to maybe consider process automation and AI to try to speed things along and help for you to process these at increased levels of volumes. So I think that's about it. Thank you for listening. There's my details there. If you wanted to contact me separately on anything, I'm very happy to talk to anybody. And that's really, I kept it nice and short because we're all to the end of the day. So any questions, really?
I've had one question put to me to ask you. Mm-hmm. To what extent has CDS been de-scoped from when it started? I understand that a whole lot of functionality that was supposed to be there when CDS was initially designed has disappeared. Do we have any view of what that is?
It's certainly some things that it's interesting because when you look at a slide deck of the original CDS, there was certain functionality in there that has certainly disappeared. For example, the ability to give it equivalent to HMUT, for example, in chief. That is not. We've got the traded dash rehearsal system, but it's not. It doesn't behave or act the same. So things like that. I mean, I probably not. I didn't see it at the very beginning, but so there are certainly some things that have not that were promised at the beginning which are not being delivered, and despite talking about this and complaining about some of this missing functionality, the functionality has been set now and is not likely to change. So.
Do you think it's going to be delivered on time or not?
Yeah. Well, I can only speak for the software developers, and if, as I said before, if we get the changes and the functionality that are required to make it work by the times that have been published, yes, the software developers will have a product ready for traders to migrate to by the end of the year. Whether there's going to be other circumstances around that might push the data, I get the impression that HMRC are very keen to, or have almost said this is the final date, right? There's no moving from this date now, and we believe that, and we want that date to stay because we would like to move on and get CDS delivered so that we can stop supporting two. So a lot of my members will have to support two systems, the Chief and CDS. So we would really like to stick to that date. But I think there is a great concern amongst my membership, and I'm sure others, about the interest in CDS. I think maybe because of the fact that it's been postponed so many times. That might be the reason. But I think that it's something that people really need to pay attention to and do something about now.
Thank you very much, Steve. Now, what I'd like to do, we still have a quick panel session. I mean, it was supposed to be half an hour. We've got 20 minutes left. We've still got TSS here. We've got the guys from Reed Smith. We've got DEFRA. We've got Lord Lilly has come all the way back to answer your questions. We've got Ellie from HMRC. I mean, there has to be a couple of questions. I mean, I suppose people are wanting to ask Eve whether you still have faith in the European project. Do you think it's...
20 minutes.
Very much so. So I think the Brexit has been a shock among many others. That was the theme of previous presentations. That gave the EU the purpose it was missing when the UK was a member. That's what I believe, and I've seen it in action in the past years. Now, there are many issues, and who knows what the future is made of. We have issues with Poland and many, many other issues. So, but I think the EU project is seen as the one tool that is giving member state relevance in the world of the 21st century. So by and large, everyone is moving in the same direction now.
The Poles, are they going to stay in, the Hungarians, or if Marie Le Pen gets in, do you think France could be sort of coming across the water to us?
You're loading it there. If all this happens, I don't know. Chances are that we are going to have 5 more years of Macron, and if it's not Macron, probably not Le Pen. But you know, we'll see. Poland is.
It could be a Brexit negotiator. Huh?
Of course. I mean, if Le Pen is there, different discussion, and then I will look back at 2021 with lots of sadness and regret. But I don't think that this is going to happen, and I did not predict Donald Trump. So, who knows? Poland is very serious because it's not the only member state not to give primacy to EU law. Actually, Germany does the same, and some of the French court does. So I think there's a need now for the EU to reflect on what to do about that, and hopefully the tempers will cool a bit, and we will talk with the Poles and not shout at them in Strasbourg, or shout at each other, and maybe the Peace Party will lose the elections, and it will be bad memory. So, but I think even despite of this. And even if you think, I mean, joke apart, even if Poland were to leave, if Hungary were to leave, the EU project would still be there. It would be just with more like-minded countries. And there is the same Euroscepticism which caused the UK to leave, exists in many member states, but not at all to the same degree. And so even Marine Le Pen, if she were to end up being the French president, I doubt that she would even jettison the euro, or like she said she would when she had no chance of being president. So my faith in the project is pretty high. But then I'm biased, so what do I know?
Thank you, Yves. I'd like to put a question to Lord Lilly, to Shankar. Article 16, what do you think the chances are of actually being activated, and what would the consequences be?
I think on balance it probably won't be activated. The fact that it could be, that its activation would be perfectly justifiable, has been enough to get the EU moving. Whether the EU has moved far enough or will move far enough in the negotiations which are now taking place remains to be seen. I went back actually to hear Lord Frost speak, and I'm not at liberty to tell you what he said.
Okay, at the risk of Ellie kicking me in the shins here, no, I think, again, I'm not going to say anything that you can't all figure out for yourselves. But I think if you look at the command paper and you look at the UK government approach to, if it was in a situation where it had to do something like that, it would be it would be fairly limited in what it would do in terms of you know that the at-risk category stays the same more or less. So you can see where that end of the spectrum is. I think it's sort of common knowledge that I think people were quite surprised by how far the EU went on the non-papers that they produced. I mean, there are certain things like what looks a little bit like an SPS trusted trader scheme, which they've always said they would never do. And there is certainly the idea of what they said about on customs in the non-paper was expanding the scope of beneficiaries and expanding the scope of benefits, which I think this is all moving in the right sort of direction. I mean, I think from a TSS perspective, our job is, I mean, the job of the protocol is to deliver no hard border, no infrastructure on the island of Ireland, unfettered access, NI to GB, as free flow as possible, GB to NI, and TSS is really supposed to be delivering that free flow as possible, GB to NI. And I think if that can be reduced to process, as much sort of administrative process as opposed to something that feels like a full-on customs declaration, then I think you've probably got there. And there are, and having looked at this for now 5 years in detail, with many colleagues, many in the room here, I'm not sure there are so many ways you can solve this problem. I think basically it's this really, and making it work a little better, taking a bit of the burden out of it, lowering the concerns and the noise level in Northern Ireland. But I'd also say one thing, which is that almost accidentally, in a way, both the EU and the UK negotiators have created a very unique position for Northern Ireland. It is effectively a special economic zone. It's effectively a special economic zone that's better than any other special economic zone because it's got very privileged access to its major markets. And I think in terms of the long term, what I hope we don't do in the future as we sort of duke this out, is that we lose that, because there's a real advantage potentially here in terms of where you would. I mean, Eve, I'll share one thing that maybe people don't know. Eve and I were colleagues at the law firm together, and
left to be in the fly.
One of the things that we got asked regularly was global capital would come to us and they would say, well, where should you invest your facilities? Where should you invest your manufacturing in order to take advantage of trade agreements and all of that? If they came to us now, I think, Eve, we'd probably say, for EU and GB, put it in Northern Ireland. And now, it's got to be stable, obviously, understand that. But so I do think that it's really incumbent on both parties now to try to find a solution. And both the UK command paper and the EU non-papers, that gap is certainly not unbridgeable, in my view.
Thank you. Are you of the same opinion that, what about sort of an immediate reaction like we had before? I mean, there was the potential, sort of activating.
No, I fully agree, and this Northern Ireland Protocol, especially as it might be modified now, is a gift to Northern Ireland. It has access to the UK market and to the EU market. That's the only place like that. So it has great value, and I think the EU is definitely willing to compromise on that. And as I said earlier, if it's not happy with whatever the UK is doing, I think we can count on the EU not to apply pressure on Northern Ireland. So I would be surprised if the protocol disappears, even if Article 16 is raised. But there would be other consequences probably for the UK.
I just have one caveat, because I think we might be in danger of misleading the audience that everything's fine. My little caveat to that is you really don't know the future. You really, you can look at the non-papers of the EU and you can speculate as to what's underneath them, because they're quite high level. There are all kinds of political pressures on the UK. And so I think the best way to answer the question that's useful to this audience is you have to prepare as if the command paper outcome might be the outcome. And you have to also prepare as if a negotiated solution might be the outcome. And business does this all the time. I mean, business is always, planning, contingency planning and so on. And that's the only way to really solve this problem right now is to have a plan for one, have a plan for the other. There are elements that might be useful in both, but that's just the way that's just what we're living with right now. It's going to be a bit of an emotional roller coaster, unfortunately, probably till Christmas again. We're probably going to ruin Christmas for the same people we've ruined Christmas for over the last several years. And you don't know, you might get an Article 16. Remember, with Article 16, if it's invoked, there's a 1-month negotiating process. You then do it. There's then a 3-month review process. So you may well get a situation where you have Article 16, then you have the negotiation, then you have a negotiated solution. We really don't know what this is going to be, and it's impossible. I think it would be a mistake to try to say, I'm going to try to guess what's going to happen and I'm going to plan accordingly. I think that would be a mistake. I think you just have to have 2 plans and be able to implement them.
Yeah, I see that, and this is where I have such sort of sympathy with our civil service. They've had to have 2 plans right the way through. Ellie, I'm sorry that all your colleagues left, because I wanted to pose a customs question. Delay declarations, I know this is not your area, but do you have any idea in this delay declaration process how many supplementary declarations have not been done?
I don't know, sorry.
Because, this to me is such a big concern. There must be a huge amount of supplementary declarations that actually never happened. And what is HMRC going to do about them? Do you have any idea?
So I don't know what the kind of the numbers are. And I would just say, even if I did know, I don't think it would be something that we would be able to share publicly anyway. I know that compliance approaches are being put in place now to ensure compliance with the processes that were put in place and with the delayed declaration requirements, and ensure that we basically don't have a lot of unready people ahead of the 1st of January when full controls come into place. So that is all part of a big planning piece that also includes what's the contingency, what happens if a lack of readiness does create issues at ports for goods coming into the UK. So that is all part of a big planning piece at the moment, but it's not something that I have enough detail on to be able to share.
Thank you. We've got some great speakers here. Anyone else got any questions? I am running. Thank you.
I don't know which speaker could actually answer this one, but I'd be keen to know what the barriers are to the EU and UK sharing the same safety and security area, because that would remove one big issue and quite a lot of cost to business.
That was very clever.
I would think very remote, because there was a path not taken where the EU would have stayed in the EU and would have had those discussions there with the submarine affair. I think there's a lot of trust lost from those member states who have the most interest in talking security within the EU. So I don't know, but yes, I don't. Of course, security is security, and when you have a threat, you need to address that threat. And the UK obviously is after France, is the most serious defense player in Europe, or before. I was kidding there. But also, when there's a need to talk security, probably say that we will talk security, but they will need some trust building necessary, I think.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all very, very much. I mean, I have thoroughly enjoyed today. I always sort of walk out these sessions with a lot more knowledge than I came into, and unfortunately a lot more questions than I had a chance to write down. But I thank you all very much. I mean, because we haven't been together for such a long time, there are drinks and snacks downstairs, and it would be great to see you all down there for a drink and a chat, and to ask our sort of speakers those questions you haven't asked them right now. So thank you all very, very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event, which I think is the 15th of December. We are having a pre-1st of January event where I'm sure a whole lot of what you've been told today would have changed, and we'll be wanting to update you on that. So thank you all very much.